Every night before bed, he takes the Bible from his nightstand. It burns his hand. He goes back to sleep. It shall be answered because they did not follow the Lord God of their fathers, the one who brought them out of Egypt. They started worshiping gods. That's why God brought all this evil upon them. I could have won Vietnam quickly. I would have if I were president. Trump went on TV and said his military genius would have ended the Vietnam War quickly. That wasn't even the craziest part. While he was rewriting history, something else was quietly falling apart. A disaster so big that even people in his administration did not know how to explain it. When Jimmy Kimmel started looking into it, the whole story began to unravel. Not slowly, all at once. President Trump always keeps his promises. When he says he's going to do something, he does it. The White House wanted people to trust him, to believe him without questioning. Jimmy Kimmel did not buy it. The problem with saying someone always keeps their promises is that eventually people start checking. Once Kimmel started listing them out, the laughter in the audience changed. It stopped sounding like comedy, started sounding like disbelief. He said he was going to end the war in Ukraine in one day. He said he'd release his tax returns, a healthcare plan, a wall, and even Greenland. This is a man whose word's as good as the things he owns. The audience laughed. Underneath the joke was something uncomfortable. It was a pattern of promises, then confusion, excuses, and distractions. The distractions were getting stranger every day with international conflicts. The administration kept saying Trump was in control. Nobody knew who was negotiating for the U.S. That's where things got weird. 3 hours ago, he extended the ceasefire. He wrote a statement saying that at the request of some leaders, they would hold off on attacking Iran. Think about that. The president threatens action, then backs off because they asked nicely. No explanation, no announcement, a social media post. Kimmel saw how absurd it was. It is Taco Tuesday, why not? The crowd laughed again. The tension kept building. Every time Trump tried to sound stronger, the situation looked more chaotic. Even his team seemed lost. The president has been over the place on this. He told ABC News that Vance would not be part of the negotiations. Then his people said Vance would be part of the negotiations. He's not in the loop or ignoring the loop. That line landed hard. Was the president disconnected from his administration? Was the administration scrambling to keep up with him? Nobody seemed to know. It got more embarrassing because officials inside the White House started leaking what was happening behind closed doors. The negotiations were being damaged by Trump's posting. He was live tweeting military negotiations like a teenager. Anonymous officials told CNN that the negotiations were harmed by Trump's tweeting. I wonder if they've considered getting him a simple phone. The audience cracked up. Then Kimmel paused. The joke transformed into something. Imagine world leaders trying to navigate a crisis while the president is impulsively posting. No filter, no restraint, no strategy, just vibes. Then Trump compared himself to great wartime leaders. He showed a chart with the lengths of wars. World War I, 4 years and 3 months. World War II, 6 years. Korean War, 3 years. Vietnam, 19 years. Iraq, 8 years. I'm 5 months. There was silence for a second. He wasn't just talking about wars. He was placing himself beside them, comparing his timeline to world wars. Kimmel immediately spotted the problem. It's a thing to say and not even correct. He's not 5 months into it. He's 2 months. He doesn't even know how long this war has been going on. That's when the audience started laughing, not at the joke, at the confusion and absurdity. Then Trump said something that changed everything. I could have won Vietnam quickly. I would have if I were president. The crowd roared. Kimmel looked stunned because this wasn't exaggeration. This was fantasy. The draft dodger really thinks he's a military tactician. Boom. One sentence, hit. He didn't stop there. The deeper Kimmel dug, the more ridiculous the story became. That's right. The man who dodged the draft to stay out of Vietnam. He got a note from a doctor claiming he had bone spurs. Suddenly, the entire image collapsed. The strong man, the war genius, the guy claiming he would have won Vietnam quickly, now being compared to the reality of a timed medical exemption. Kimmel twisted the knife. Had a young Donald Trump not sustained that injury, he would have fought in the war. He would have risen to the top, won it quickly. Laughter. Then he delivered the line nobody saw coming. If he had been captain of the Titanic, Leonardo DiCaprio would be alive today. The audience lost it. Here's the thing. That joke worked because underneath it was something viewers recognized. The pattern: Trump constantly rewrites reality around himself. Every failure becomes someone's fault. Every impossible scenario ends with him as the hero. While he was telling stories about victories, a real disaster was growing. A disaster involving billions. Hardly anyone was talking about it until Kimmel brought it up. In February, the Supreme Court ruled that Trump's tariffs were illegal. The government has to pay back up to $175 billion in refunds. The audience gasped. The number sounded almost unreal. $175 billion. That's a number people can't emotionally process. Kimmel kept going. Over 56,000 companies have registered to get that money back. The refund portal, the website doesn't work. Of course it didn't. The administration that talked about business genius couldn't even build a functioning refund website. The tariffs were ruled illegal. The government owed billions back. Thousands of companies were. The portal crashed. Complete chaos. Instead of addressing the crisis directly, Trump pivoted to the Bible. At the White House, he read from the Bible as part of a week event. The audience immediately knew what was coming next. There was something about watching political catastrophe collide with stage spirituality, especially when Trump himself was chosen to read scripture. That alone felt like satire. Kimmel pushed it even further. The White House asked Americans to pray for an hour a week. Then perfect timing. Oh, believe me, since he took office, we've been praying for at least that. The crowd erupted again. Kimmel wasn't done. Not even close. Then he delivered the call back that opened the segment. Every night before bed, he takes the Bible from his nightstand. It burns his hand. He goes back to sleep. Laughter. While the audience was still laughing, Kimmel swerved again. Another hard turn, another escalation. Apparently, Trump wasn't just praying over America. Now he was trying to save an airline. An airline. President Dr. Jesus has also been praying for Spirit Airlines. The room exploded instantly. Even hearing those words together sounded ridiculous. Trump, Spirit Airlines, government bailout. Then Kimmel described the airline. Spirit Air is like an airline, but every seat is a middle seat. Laughter. Then came the punchline underneath the punchline. Trump publicly suggesting maybe the government should help Spirit Airlines survive. Why? Because according to Kimmel, Trump wanted another plane. That's how he asked for another plane. It's maybe the government will help. Then the line that tied everything together. Donald Trump in ways is the Spirit Airlines of presidents. Perfect. Cheap chaos disguised as luxury. Constant turbulence. Hidden fees emotionally charged to the country later. Just when you thought the segment had peaked, Trump handed Kimmel one final gift. The Apple story. This story was unbelievable, not because it was emotional, because it sounded completely invented. I tell a story about a woman. She got 3 apples. An old woman, 3 apples. An elderly woman brings them up to the counter. 3 apples. That's what she lives on. The audience already sensed where this was going. Trump describing inflation through an unnamed old woman. Somehow the story kept getting stranger. She looked at the woman, said, "Is that the right price?" Then realizes the price has gone up by 40%. Then she says, "Oh, I can't afford it." Pause. 1 apple. That was the centerpiece. An old woman sadly returning 1 apple. Trump delivered it like it was the ultimate symbol of economic collapse. She brings 1 apple back. She didn't have money for one of the apples. She brought it back to the refrigeration. She buys 2 apples of 3. The room was quiet for a second. Not because people were emotional, but because they were trying not to laugh. It sounded fake, overwritten, like somebody improvising behavior. Kimmel knew exactly what to do. He decided to find her. What happened next became the biggest laugh of the segment. So before, when Joe Biden was president, you had to put an apple because you couldn't afford it. That's true. My Social Security didn't go far with Biden's inflation. Okay, inflation is still very high today. How do you afford all those apples? Excuse me, I said. How do you afford all those apples? Then the hard left turn nobody expected. Oh, I give hand jobs. Cheering. The crowd detonated. Absolute chaos, but Kimmel kept pushing. Excuse me? Laughter. I'm sorry, what did you say? I said, I give hand jobs to men to make ends meet. I do it in the alley behind the supermarket. Men pull up, I get in their cars, get to work. The audience completely lost control. The absurdity perfectly matched the absurdity of the story. That's why it worked. It exposed how ridiculous the fake emotional setup felt from the beginning. Suddenly, the entire night snapped into focus. The Vietnam claims, the tweeted negotiations, the Bible reading, the illegal tariffs, the broken refund website, the Spirit Airlines bailout talk, the imaginary Apple woman. Every single thing pointed back to the core idea. Image over reality, performance over substance, spectacle over truth. Jimmy Kimmel understood something most politicians still don't. Sometimes comedy hits harder than journalism because jokes bypass defenses. People laugh first, then realize what they're actually laughing at. That's exactly what happened here. Trump tried to sell himself as a military mastermind. The details told a completely different story. A man contradicting his staff. A president comparing himself to World War II generals. A self-proclaimed dealmaker overseeing a $175 billion refund disaster. An administration asking America to pray while government systems collapse behind the scenes. Through all of it, Kimmel never needed dramatic speeches. He just lined up the clips one after another. Let the contradictions destroy themselves. That's what made the segment go viral. Not politics, not ideology, contrast, the massive gap between the image being sold and the reality people were watching unfold. Once viewers saw that gap, they couldn't unsee it. Maybe that's the most dangerous thing for any public figure. Not outrage, not criticism, ridicule. Because outrage still gives power. Ridicule shrinks the myth. It turns the man into a punchline. Once that happens, every speech sounds different. Every dramatic promise feels weaker. Every performance starts looking rehearsed. That's why this moment mattered more than people realized. It wasn't another late-night comedy segment. It was a collapse of the fantasy. A president claiming he could have won Vietnam quickly. While comedians calmly reminded the audience he avoided serving in it, a leader demanding trust, while his own administration leaked confusion anonymously to the press. A man telling stories about struggling Americans while inventing cartoonish Apple metaphors. That sounded detached from reality. And the brutal part, Kimmel didn't even have to exaggerate. The clips did the work themselves. That's what made it devastating. By the end of the night, the audience wasn't just laughing anymore. They were watching the image crack in time. One contradiction at a time, one statement at a time, one impossible claim at a time. Until finally the strongman genius act started feeling like leadership, more like performance art spiraling out of control. Somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, one question kept hanging in the air. If this is what's happening publicly, what's happening behind doors? And honestly, that might be the scariest part of the whole story. Because sometimes the jokes are funny, sometimes they're brutal. Every once in a while, the punchline reveals something real. When that happens, people stop laughing for a second. They just stare. Subscribe if you believe the truth is funnier than the lies.